We are back again with Cape Ann historian Les Bartlett. How you doing, Les? Good to see you
I'm
again.
doing great. Good to see you, Corey. Good to see you, Heather.
Well, we're loving these little historiettes you've been providing us week
Thanks
after
so much.
week. And you have another fascinating one for us this week.
I've got one that I don't think too many people have heard of. It's called The Story of the Gloucester Punch.
Hmm.
And if you think of punch, it's like, well, there's a punchline to the story, because there is a punchline to this story. And the story is that in 1925, the Gloucester Chamber of Commerce, you know, we're past the pandemic. We've done the stories of the pandemic, and Gloucester and all of Cape Ann is committed to bringing moneyed summer visitors to Cape Ann. It's the first big wave. They've gone through the Gloucester 300. They've had a lot of attraction for Gloucester history. And they've got a lot of B&Bs, a lot of hotels and inns. And so in 1925, the Gloucester Chamber of Commerce comes up with a plan. And the plan, they go to one of the leading businessmen, a man named William Publicover. And I need to pause and talk about this name because it's one of the most, I thought it was a made up name, like Publicover. And the family's still around. I guess there's still many descendants. And Publicover, 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 came out of Nova Scotia. And William's father, Joseph, was a lumberman and a fisherman, and spent his life, and his father, I believe, had been in Nova Scotia as well. And William was born in 1871. In 1887, he takes a schooner down to Gloucester, and he stays. And he had two jobs. He would work in the summers and in the fall in all the various inns, starting out as a busboy, changing the sheets, doing the dishes, and he learned the hotel trade. And by, I think, around 1903, he buys the Rockaway from Dorcas Foster, who had been running it, and he becomes the proprietor. But all along, his love of the sea kept taking him back to the Grand Banks, and many of his descendants and family were involved with the sea. So he's very well ensconced in Gloucester's love of the sea. He was a staunch Republican. He was in the Masons, very active in the business and social communities of Gloucester. He, at the Rockaway, before there was the Rocky Neck Art Colony or the North Shore Arts or the Gloucester Society of the Arts, people flocked to his place for incredible Mardi Gras-like events. So in 1925, William A. Publicover owned a REO sedan, which was the car of distinction. If you were wealthy, if you were rich, it's the type of car that gentlemen and the gentry ran. And he put it at the services of the Gloucester Chamber of Commerce, who said, well, the best way we can attract people to Gloucester is to drive this car decorated with art, with slogans from Gloucester all the way down the East Coast to Miami in February, so that the people wintering there would know where they need to come in the summer. It was pretty preposterous what they put up. On the top of the sedan was a scale model of the twin lights of Thatcher's. And then along the sides of the car, there were slogans that said, like, well, there are over 40 inns, there are over
hotels, 40 hotels.
40 hotels. How many
cottages?
1,000 cottages. $2 million worth of boulevards to walk along.
Yeah,
right?
Who measures boulevards in dollars? That's
I thought at first it was paving stones, but I looked at it. Okay, this is great. And Publicover drives along with the car. It's his car. Congressman Andrew Piatt has kind of been smoothing some of the schmoozing spots to stop at. And one of the key stops they stop is they stop in Washington, D.C. at the White House. They managed to get Calvin Coolidge to come out. Piatt drags him out from the White House and says, we would like to have your picture taken next to this vehicle. And the newspaper article recounts that Calvin took one look at the vehicle and turned it around on his heels and went back inside the White House. No way, okay? So they modify some of the writing along the sides. I've got a couple of other pictures that aren't as clear that show they kind of tone down the message, right? But it was the fascinating thing is this was a plan from the Gloucester Chamber of Commerce. I uncovered this because of my deep passion and love of the motif number one float. there was a throwaway line that when the Legionnaires decided they wanted to go out to Chicago World's Fair, they knew that Gloucester had been driving around advertising vehicles. Now, I believe that what happens is this car goes down along the way to the coast. Okay? And then after that, they start to saturate the North Shore. That subsequent to this, between 26 and 30, they're driving a car with a trailer and a dory on it around the North Shore, drumming up business for people to come to Gloucester. Okay? So it's fascinating because, you know, we live in a time now where this question is, Rockport doesn't want to let Gloucester people come in, right? I mean, you get this, Gloucester doesn't want Rockport people to come in. You get this real small Cape Ann structure of who's in, who's out, who's on first, who isn't. And yet, and what gets lost is the incredible vitality of the summer gentry, the summer tourists, the steam trunk visitors, all of these being welcome to Cape Ann, realizing that the community could not sustain itself on fishing and farming alone. And there is this subtle distinction that the Gloucester Punch underscores, which is it's not about Cape Ann as a destination. Cape Ann becomes a destination with the 128 bridge, where you can get in the car and here's a summer place you go for 3 hours and you leave and you go and you come back. When it was only the Cut Bridge, it was a pilgrimage to get here. It took time. It really took time, and there was an awareness that you were coming to this island event, and therefore, you know, I'm old enough to have actually been able to talk with some of the people who came into Gloucester and Rockport in the 50s by train. And there were special, you know, I should even jump ahead to that. There were trains out of New York and Philadelphia and Washington that were directly coming to Rockport and Gloucester. I should say Gloucester and Rockport. So the punch is like, the punchline is, here it is, folks, here's this car, you know, with all this preposterous advertising. And it was all done by artists. The artists are unnamed as to who did it.
So Les, was Public Cover doing this, he was a member of the Chamber of Commerce? And
Yes, he was. Yep.
The Rockaway was an active inn, and
oh yes,
and
yep.
he was really hoping to promote these wealthy visitors to Cape Ann to fill in, fill
sure.
up the inn. Okay.
Yeah.
And they made it to Florida?
They made it to Florida. You know, I've not been able to, again, I've been able to gather extra material by going online to newspapers.com and finding, in fact, the picture that I sent you is from the Berkshire Eagle. It's not even from the Boston Globe. Yeah.
Good newspaper, fine newspaper.
I know, yeah.
But as far as we know, he only made this trip once. And
They
then
only made the trip this 1 year.
And then he circulated around the North Shore.
I don't even know if it was William or not. I just know that the chamber continued at
Oh.
that point, that they really accelerated.
So we should tell Ken Reel from the Cape Ann Chamber of Commerce to take note, right?
I think so. You know, the opportunity is to do a retro. Okay.
Bring back the Rio Grande.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great story. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I would add the story. I brought it up here of what his. It's from 1930 at the Rockaway, and it's called the Season's End Party in East Gloucester, original fare given by Mr. and Mrs. Publicover. Okay, it says one of the most originally staged end of the season parties was given at the Rockaway, East Gloucester, by Mr. and Mrs. William A. Publicover. The ballroom was decorated to simulate the cabin of a fishing schooner. So it was draped with nets, and there were seines fastened all around the walls with glass ball buoys and other bright ornaments. They had a master of ceremonies from Washington, D.C. There was a grand march, okay, along outside into the Rockaway, and it was concluded on the grounds with the Paul Jones dance, which was like a square dance where you get to meet people. Okay, one of the great novelties was the dance of the costumed cats and mice. So this is the 1930s. This is probably before, what was Hollywood's rating for, you know, the rating for movies? Before they could have these sexual innuendos, because all the cats were the men and all the mice were the women. And you can draw your own conclusions as to where it went, okay? But the point is, this is at the time when the Rockport Art Association is just beginning its costume ball. Rocky Neck picks it up. And what it is it's this coming together of summer visitors and people living here year round in a costumed affair. Okay.
And we can
Hopefully.
assume that Rockport took the bait and decided to drive their motif #1 model to Chicago, to the World's Fair, because
Right.
they watched Gloucester drive this little car to Florida.
Yeah, I'm sure the car to Florida, and as I say, maybe there was, the first reference I'd seen was of a trailer with a dory going around the North Shore. But it's all part of the same line, because when the Rockport Legion decides to do their float, they're talking with Lewis Poole, who was in the Gloucester Legion at
Wow.
Wath Hall. And, you know, you get so you've got the greatest vehicle, the real sedan in 1925. And the story with the motif float is that Lewis finds an old school bus chassis with a blown engine that they give to Rockport. It's sort of like, well, go ahead, you know, you're of no account. Oh yeah. So the tit for tat and the back and forth is really pretty amazing.
Yeah, that is a wonderful story of the Gloucester Punch.
Good, the Gloucester Punch.
Yeah, we look forward to more stories from you, Les
Thanks
Bartlett.
much.
Thanks.
Okay, take care. Be well, all.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot.
Bye now.